I always thought if my wedding fell apart, I'd know ahead of time. You imagine warning signs, right? Big flashing red flags waving in your face, whispered arguments late at night, nervous glances, excuses that don't quite add up. But with Liam, there was nothing. Not at first. For months, everything seemed perfect, or as close to perfect as you can get when you're knee-deep in floral arrangements, dress fittings, and bachelorette party planning. Liam wasn't a grand gesture guy, but he showed up where it mattered. He held my hand through the seating chart wars. He went cake tasting even though he said all cake tasted the same. He kissed my forehead every night and said, "Can't wait to marry you." There were no warning signs. No second guesses. Until there were. It started small, the way an earthquake sometimes does, just a little tremor you're not sure you actually felt. A missed call here. A delayed text there. Little things. Things you could explain away if you wanted to. And I did want to. Desperately. The week before the wedding, Liam got busy with work. He wasn't answering texts as quickly. Wasn't calling when he said he would. He chalked it up to stress, last-minute projects before the honeymoon, he said. I told myself it made sense. We were both busy. Weddings were stressful. Life was stressful. But deep down, a tiny crack was starting to split open inside me. Still, I pressed on. I finished the seating chart. I triple-confirmed the venue. I picked up my dress. I smiled through it all, ignoring the way my stomach twisted tighter with every passing day. 3 days before the wedding, Liam missed our final venue walkthrough. He didn't call. He didn't text. He just didn't show up. I stood there in the empty banquet hall, clutching my wedding planner binder like it was a life raft, telling myself, begging myself not to panic. He's busy. He's tired. He's still coming. He's still marrying you. I left him a voicemail. Then another. And another. No response. When I got home, I found his side of the closet untouched. His toothbrush still by the sink. His half-finished novel still sitting on the nightstand. Everything looked normal. Except for the growing, gnawing feeling that it was. 2 days before the wedding, my mom sat me down at the kitchen table, her face lined with worry. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "are you sure he's okay?" I nodded automatically. What else could I say? I couldn't even say it out loud, the terrible, impossible thought that maybe he wasn't coming. Maybe I was about to become the punchline of every worst-case scenario wedding story ever told. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the shadows twisting into horrible shapes above me, my mind racing in circles. I called him again. And again. Straight to voicemail every time. No word from Liam. Nothing. One day before the wedding, it was official. He was gone. No goodbye. No explanation. Just gone. His phone disconnected. His apartment dark and empty. No notes. No family who could explain it. It was like he had been swallowed whole by the universe. The morning of the wedding, I sat in my old childhood bedroom, the one with the faded posters on the walls and the creaky twin bed, and stared at my reflection. Puffy eyes. Chapped lips. A hollow look in my face that didn't feel like mine. The house buzzed around me, relatives arriving, friends calling, caterers finalizing details, all expecting a wedding to happen. And maybe it was the exhaustion. Or the heartbreak. Or the sheer, stubborn fury boiling up inside me. But somewhere around noon, a thought sparked inside me. What if I went through with it anyway? Not the marriage. Not the I do. But the day. The party. The celebration. Not for Liam. Not for us. For me. He had taken so much already, my trust, my peace, my dreams of a future we had promised to build. I wasn't going to let him take this day too. I picked up my phone with hands that only shook a little bit now. Texted the bridal party. Called the venue. Told the caterer. The wedding was still happening. Just without the groom. And somehow, someway, I was going to survive it. Telling people was the hardest part. Every time I said the words out loud, "There's no groom," it became more real. The looks on their faces made it real too. Shock, pity, confusion. Some of my friends cried harder than I did. My mom just stood in the kitchen, one hand over her mouth, blinking fast like if she didn't blink, maybe the tears wouldn't fall. Even the caterer hesitated on the phone, asking, "You're sure you still want us to come?" I was sure. Not because I wasn't broken. I was. God, I was shattered in 1,000 ugly, aching pieces. But I was also angry. Not loud, screaming anger. No, it was quieter. Deeper. The kind of anger that settles into your bones and makes you determined not to let someone else's cowardice define you. He ghosted me. He left without a word, without a shred of decency. But he didn't get to erase me. Not today. So we pivoted. The invitations had already gone out months ago. The venue was paid for. The food, the music, the decorations, all ready. I told everyone the truth. There would be no wedding. No ceremony. No vows. But there would still be a celebration. Not for Liam. Not for us. For May. For all of us who had shown up, who had believed, who had loved fully and bravely and without guarantees. I expected maybe a handful of people would come, mostly out of obligation. I half expected the venue would be a graveyard, me sipping flat champagne alone in a giant, echoing ballroom. But when I walked into the venue that afternoon, clutching the skirt of the dress I decided to wear anyway, my beautiful, painstakingly chosen dress, the sight nearly knocked the breath out of me. The room was full. Packed. Family, friends. Neighbors I hadn't seen in years. Coworkers from old jobs. College roommates. People I hadn't realized had loved me enough to show up on the worst day of my life. I froze just inside the doorway, the sunlight pouring through the huge windows, my heart caught somewhere between agony and wonder. And then they started clapping. Not polite pity clapping. Real applause. Real thunderous, earth-shaking applause. For May. Because I was there. Because I was still standing. Because I had survived what was supposed to break me. The dam inside me finally cracked then. Tears blurred my vision, hot and unstoppable. But I didn't run. I didn't hide. I lifted my chin, wiped my face with the back of my hand, and smiled. They say weddings are supposed to be about love. And in that moment, surrounded by people who chose me, not because they had to, but because they wanted to, I realized I had more love than I ever understood before. Liam didn't get the final word. He didn't get to be the end of my story. He was just a chapter. A hard one. A brutal one. But not the last one. The DJ, who had clearly been briefed, pivoted effortlessly. Instead of playing the soft instrumental music we had picked for the ceremony, he cranked up an anthem, something loud, defiant, joyful. And just like that, the day became a party. There was dancing. There was laughing, real laughing, not the brittle, panicked kind I had been doing for days. There were endless trays of food and wine that flowed like water. The dance floor was full all night. Aunts twirling nieces. Friends leaping into ridiculous, drunken conga lines. My mom, barefoot by the end of it, pulling me into a fierce hug that said more than words ever could. "You're incredible," she whispered in my ear. I believed her. For the first time in a long time, I actually believed her. Somewhere near midnight, I stepped outside to catch my breath. The cool night air wrapped around me, sharp and sweet. Above, the stars blinked lazily in a deep velvet sky. I tilted my head back and closed my eyes. It still hurt. Of course it hurt. But it didn't own me. The worst thing that had ever happened to me had come and gone, and I was still here. Maybe a little bruised. Maybe a little scarred. But also unbreakable. And as I stood there under the stars, surrounded by the hum of music and laughter spilling out into the night, I made myself a promise. This would not be the end of my story. It would be the beginning. The morning after the party, the real weight of everything came crashing down. There was no Liam beside me. No suitcase half-packed for a honeymoon. No blurry-eyed laughter about how wild and wonderful the night had been. Just me. Sitting on the edge of my childhood bed again, staring at the crumpled, once pristine wedding dress hanging on the back of my door. The room smelled faintly of champagne and flowers. Outside the window, the world moved on without noticing, birds chirping, cars humming past on their way to whatever regular Saturday mornings held for them. And I sat there, still in the ruins of something that was supposed to be sacred. It wasn't regret that hit me the hardest. It wasn't even sadness, though there was plenty of that too. It was exhaustion. Bone-deep, soul-tired exhaustion. Because when the music stops and the guests go home and the adrenaline wears off, you're left with the quiet. And the quiet asks questions you can't dodge. Why wasn't I enough? How could he do this? How did I not see it coming? The hardest part was not having any answers. Not really. I made my way downstairs eventually, the house eerily still. My parents had gone out for groceries, leaving a note in careful handwriting, "Be back soon. Love you." Simple. Safe. Proof that not everyone leaves without a word. I wandered into the kitchen, poured a mug of cold coffee from the pot someone had forgot to turn off, and sat at the table, cradling it between both hands like it might anchor me. My phone buzzed from where I had tossed it onto the counter last night. A dozen new messages. Texts from friends, selfies from the dance floor, blurry videos of the cake that someone had still brought out and served even without a bride and groom to cut it. Proud of you. Love you. You're amazing. I scrolled through them slowly, soaking in every word like sunlight through a cracked window. And somewhere between a video of my aunt doing the worm on the dance floor and a text from my best friend that just said F***Liam in all caps, I started to smile. Not because everything was okay, but because for the first time I could see that maybe, just maybe, it would be. It would be different. Messier. Harder. But still good. Still worth waking up for. I spent the next few days buried under a mountain of logistics I hadn't anticipated. Canceling the honeymoon. Returning the personalized decorations. Boxing up what few gifts had arrived early. It was a slow, painful unwinding of a life I thought I was building, detail by excruciating detail. Every return to sender label felt like peeling off a layer of skin. But I did it. Piece by piece. There was no dramatic breakdown. No screaming into pillows or smashing plates in the backyard. Just quiet, determined grief. Grief that understood that love sometimes leaves. And that no amount of anger or bargaining can glue it back into place. I thought about Liam more often than I wanted to admit. Where he was. What he was thinking, if he was thinking about me at all. I wondered if he regretted it. If he missed me. If he ever would. But eventually, I realized those questions didn't change anything. His silence had been an answer all along. Loud and clear. He wasn't my future. He never really had been. It's funny how clearly you can see things once you're no longer trying to fit them into the story you wanted so badly to believe. Looking back, the little cracks were there. Moments when he pulled away just slightly. Times when I made excuses for the way he forgot anniversaries, the way he hesitated when talking about the future. I had loved him enough for both of us. But love, real love, is supposed to be mutual. Not something you drag behind you like a broken kite, hopping it'll catch the wind someday if you just run hard enough. And somewhere in the middle of a quiet Tuesday afternoon, while tossing a bouquet of dried-up wedding flowers into the trash, I realized something even bigger. Maybe this wasn't just an ending. Maybe it was a beginning. The kind I never would have chosen. The kind that still hurt like hell. But a beginning all the same. And for the first time since Liam disappeared, I let myself imagine what that beginning could look like. A few days after what was supposed to be my wedding, I packed a bag and left town. No grand announcement. No dramatic goodbye. Just me, a duffel bag, and a gas tank full enough to take me somewhere new, somewhere far enough away that the memories couldn't reach me for a little while. I didn't even know where I was going when I pulled onto the highway. All I knew was that I couldn't stay. Not just physically, emotionally too. Not when every grocery store aisle, every coffee shop, every familiar street corner whispered Liam's name like a curse. I ended up 3 towns over in a small beachside motel, the kind with cracked tile floors and sun-faded umbrellas. The woman at the front desk didn't ask any questions when I checked in. She just handed me a key with a worn plastic tag and said, "Enjoy your stay, sweetheart," like she somehow knew I wasn't there for a vacation. The room smelled faintly of saltwater and old fabric softener. The bed creaked when I dropped my bag onto it. The air conditioner rattled with a steady hum. It was perfect. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't scroll through social media, even though my notifications were still blowing up with supportive messages and wedding photos people didn't know whether to delete or keep. I just sat on the little balcony, watching the ocean roll in and out like it had been doing long before my heart broke and would keep doing long after. For the first time in what felt like weeks, I let myself really feel everything. The hurt, the anger, the fear, but also the tiny, stubborn flicker of hope that was still buried deep inside me, a spark that said, "This isn't the end of you." The second day, I rented a bike from a surf shop down the street and rode for miles along the coast. The air was clean and sharp in my lungs. The sun burned my cheeks. The world felt big again, bigger than Liam, bigger than one ruined day, bigger than the version of myself that had been so sure her whole life was mapped out already. Somewhere around the 5th mile, pedaling hard against the wind, I started laughing. Real, startled laughter that bubbled up out of nowhere and left me breathless. I was alive. Bruised, yes. But breathing. Moving forward. Making my own momentum. That night, sitting on the motel bed eating greasy fries from a paper bag, I pulled out the wedding invitation I had stuffed into my purse before leaving town. It was still crisp and perfect. Heavy cardstock. Gold foil lettering. Our names intertwined in fancy script like a promise written in stone. I stared at it for a long time. Then I tore it in half. Clean, deliberate rip. No hesitation. Then I tore it again. And again. And again. Until it was just a pile of useless confetti in my lap. I threw it all into the motel room trash can and watched it settle into the other discarded pieces of the day. It didn't fix everything. It didn't magically erase the hurt. But it felt good in the real, messy way that real healing often does. It felt earned. By the 3rd day, I didn't cry when I woke up. I didn't reach for my phone, hopping for a message that would never come. I didn't replay every memory, every conversation, searching for the moment where it all went wrong. I just got up, breathed in, breathed out, and thought, what now? Not what if. Not why me. Just what now? It wasn't a grand revelation. It wasn't fireworks or angels singing or some magical lightbulb moment. It was just a quiet, steady choice. The choice to move forward. Even if it was slow. Even if it hurt. Even if I had to rebuild my life from the foundation up. And as I packed my bag to head home, my home, not the home we were supposed to share, I felt that choice settle into my bones like armor. Stronger. Wiser. Ready. Not ready for another relationship. Not ready to trust easily again. But ready for me. Ready to start again, this time not waiting for someone else to catch up. Driving back into town felt like stepping into a new skin. The streets were the same traffic lights, the same cracked sidewalks, the same familiar storefronts. But I wasn't the same. I had left shattered. I was coming back stitched together, not perfectly, not neatly, but stronger. The empty apartment greeted me like an old friend. It was supposed to be temporary. Liam and I had planned to move into a bigger place after the wedding. Something with a backyard, maybe a guest room. Space for a future that no longer existed. At first, the apartment felt haunted. Little reminders everywhere. His favorite coffee mug on the drying rack. A half-used bottle of shampoo in the shower. An unopened package addressed to both our names on the kitchen counter. It would have been easy to slip into sadness again. To crumble under the weight of all the things that weren't going to happen. But instead, I moved. I spent the first night cleaning like my life depended on it. Scrubbing floors. Washing sheets. Filling trash bags with everything that didn't feel like me anymore. It was exhausting. It was cathartic. Each drawer I emptied, each shelf I wiped clean, felt like reclaiming a tiny piece of myself. A reminder that this space, this life, didn't belong to him. It belonged to me. When I finally collapsed onto the couch, sweaty and sore and covered in dust, I looked around at the clean, empty rooms and felt something unexpected. Pride. Not because I had erased Liam. That wasn't the point. It was because I had stayed. Vaude. Refused to disappear just because he had. The next few days were a blur of small, deliberate choices. I bought a new set of dishes, bright, colorful ones that didn't match anything Liam would have picked. I rearranged the furniture. I hung photos of places I loved, places I wanted to see again on my own terms. I even changed my number. It felt dramatic, maybe even unnecessary, but it was a line in the sand. A declaration to myself, you get to start fresh, you don't have to wait for permission. Of course, not every moment was strong. There were still days when the sadness hit out of nowhere, standing in the grocery store holding 2-for-1 pasta sauce, remembering how he used to tease me for overcooking noodles. Or when a wedding song came on the radio and I had to pull the car over because my chest hurt too much to drive. Healing isn't a straight line. It's messy. It's brutal. It's confusing. But somewhere inside all that mess, I found something beautiful, something I never would have discovered otherwise. Freedom. Freedom to decide who I was when no one else was watching. Freedom to want things just for myself, without having to compromise or shrink or twist to fit someone else's life plan. Freedom to dream again, not about a wedding or a white picket fence, but about real, messy, brilliant living. One evening, maybe a month after the almost wedding, I sat out on my tiny balcony with a cup of tea, watching the sunset smear pink and orange across the sky. I realized I hadn't thought about Liam all day. Not once. It didn't mean I hated him. It didn't mean I wished him pain. It just meant I had finally, quietly, without even noticing it, moved on. Not to someone new. Not to some next big milestone. But to myself. And as the last streaks of daylight faded and the first stars blinked into existence above me, I smiled to myself. Because even though I hadn't asked for this path, even though it had hurt more than anything I had ever experienced, it had brought me somewhere precious. It had brought me back to me. It started with small things. A pottery class at the community center because I had always secretly wanted to try. Joining a weekend hiking group even though I didn't know a single soul in it. Taking myself out to dinner, real dinner, not drive-through, sitting at a tiny corner table with a book and a glass of wine and no one to impress but myself. Each little decision was like planting a flag in new territory. I wasn't doing these things to fill some hole left by Liam. I wasn't doing them to prove a point. I was doing them because I finally could. Because the future I thought I wanted, the one built around someone else's timeline, someone else's approval, had disappeared. And in its place was a blank canvas. Terrifying. Frey. One Saturday during a group hike, I met someone. His name was Noah. He had a crooked smile, a permanent streak of dirt on his jeans, and a laugh that sounded like it came from his whole chest. He wasn't trying to be impressive. He wasn't rehearsed or polished. He was just real. We didn't fall into some whirlwind romance. No violins played. No sparks exploded in the sky. It was quieter than that. Easier. We walked side by side for hours, talking about nothing and everything, favorite childhood cartoons, worst school lunches, places we wanted to visit. When we finally reached the summit, sweaty and sore, Noah turned to me and said, "You're pretty incredible, you know that." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't flinch away from the compliment. I didn't downplay it. I didn't feel like an imposter wearing someone else's armor. I just smiled. Because somewhere along the way, I had started to believe it myself. We started hanging out more, casual coffee dates that turned into long walks, group hikes that ended with late-night conversations under the stars. He never pushed. Never rushed. He gave me space to be exactly who I was, messy, healing, sometimes still a little bit broken. And somehow he liked me even more because of it, not in spite of it. One evening, sitting on my balcony again, I realized I wasn't scared anymore. Not scared of being hurt. Not scared of starting over. Not scared of dreaming new dreams. Because I wasn't building my life around someone else anymore. I was building it around me. Anyone who wanted to be a part of it was welcome. But I wasn't going to lose myself again to make someone stay. I wasn't rushing toward marriage or milestones. I wasn't measuring my worth by how fast I checked off the boxes. I was living. Fully. Messily. Bravely. And it felt better than any picture-perfect wedding ever could have. One afternoon, months later, Noah and I stumbled across a small outdoor festival, live music, food trucks, laughter spilling into the streets. Without thinking, he grabbed my hand and pulled me into a clumsy, laughing spin right there in the middle of the crowd. For a second, a flash of fear shot through me, the old fear, the one that whispered, "Don't trust this, don't hope too much." But it passed. Because this was different. This wasn't a grand promise or a carefully curated future. This was just two people, imperfect, healing, spinning wildly in the sunlight, laughing because they could. And I realized, right there in the middle of the crowd, maybe life wasn't about finding someone who made all the pain disappear. Maybe it was about finding someone who didn't flinch when they saw your scars. Someone who chose you not just for the easy parts, but for the whole messy, real thing. And more importantly, maybe it was about choosing yourself first so you could let someone else in without losing anything that mattered. I squeezed Noah's hand and laughed so hard my cheeks hurt. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not because everything was perfect, but because finally it was real. It's funny how life has a way of quietly, stubbornly, stitching itself back together when you're not looking. One day you wake up and realize you didn't think about them first thing in the morning. You didn't measure your happiness by their absence. You didn't replay the what-ifs and why-nots like some broken record stuck in your head. You just woke up, breathed in, lived, and somewhere along the way, the wound turned into a scar, something permanent, yes, but no longer bleeding. No longer defining you. That's where I found myself, almost a year after what should have been my wedding day. Not healed in some perfect, polished way. Not magically free of sadness or fear. But stronger, wiser, whole in a way I had never been before, even when I thought I was at my happiest. The life I had now wasn't the one I had planned. It wasn't the neatly arranged timeline I had once sketched out in my head, with penciled-in milestones and glittering celebrations. It was messier, slower, more beautifully unpredictable. And it was mine. There were days I still caught glimpses of the old pain, usually when I least expected it. Passing a wedding boutique. Hearing the faint echo of a song that was supposed to be our first dance. Seeing a couple arguing in a parking lot and realizing that even love that looks perfect from the outside has its cracks. But those moments didn't break me anymore. They were just part of the landscape now, familiar landmarks in a journey that had taught me more than any love story ever could. I didn't know where things would go with Noah. And for once, that didn't terrify me. It excited me. Because whatever we built, we were building slowly, honestly, without the crushing weight of expectations or timelines. We weren't racing toward an altar. We were walking beside each other, two whole people, choosing each other, not needing to fix or complete anything. And for the first time, that was enough. That was everything. One evening, as we sat on the beach, the same beach where I had once biked for miles just to remember what breathing felt like, Noah handed me a small, smooth stone. It fit perfectly in my palm, worn down by years of waves and wind. Found it earlier, he said, shrugging, thought it looked like you. I turned it over in my hand, confused. It wasn't shiny or flashy. It wasn't shaped like a heart or engraved with some cheesy message. It was simple, strong, weathered but still beautiful. Still whole. I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. Maybe he understood me better than I realized. We didn't talk much after that. Just sat there shoulder to shoulder, watching the sun bleed into the water, the sky ablaze with colors no camera could ever capture properly. And as the first stars winked into existence above us, I thought about the girl I had been a year ago, standing in her wedding dress, holding a broken heart, trying to figure out how to survive the wreckage. I wished I could reach back in time and tell her, "You're going to be okay." Not because someone going to rescue you. Not because everything going to magically fall into place. But because you're stronger than you know. Because you'll learn to rescue yourself. Because you'll build a life out of the pieces, and it'll be even better than the one you thought you wanted. Maybe the life you imagine isn't always the life you get. But sometimes, if you're lucky, it's better. It's freer. It's real. It's yours. I tucked the stone into my pocket and leaned my head on Noah's shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath, the warm weight of possibility stretching out ahead of us. The world was still broken in places. So was I. But there was beauty in the brokenness. Joy in the rebuilding. And as the tide pulled the water back and forth across the sand, whispering promises to the stars, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Fully, fiercely, unapologetically. And I was just getting started.